Welcome to New York Got Game.
Welcome back to another edition of New York Got Game. Interesting times around New York basketball. If you're a fan of the St. John's Red Storm, then you're really excited. This team has been on a roll. They just beat UConn on Sunday. They look like they're well on their way to wrapping up the Big East title. We'll have more coming up on Eye of the Storm this week. I'll be talking to Zach Braziller about St. John's. They look to close out their regular season. So if you're a fan of the Johnnies, good vibes on the college basketball side here in New York. Now, on the professional side, if you're a fan of New York Knicks, very interesting times. The team had an absolutely interesting weekend. They faced the top two teams in the East, and let's just say it did not go the way Knicks fans wanted it to go at all. So this episode is going to be dedicated to evaluating the weekend for the New York Knicks, looking at what is wrong with the team, where they are. I know some fans out there are really mad. It's going to be, I guess you could say, a little bit of a therapy session this week here on New York Got Game. But, we're going to look out for the people. That's what we're going to try to do. I'm going to talk about the Knicks with a very special guest who'll be joining me. No time to waste any time this week. So much to get into, so let's get right into it. All right, told you we have to talk about it. The New York Knicks and the weekend that was not a good one for Knicks fans, as they fell to the Cavs, they fell to the Celtics. I told you guys this episode might be for some of you a bit of a therapy session, because I understand that some of the Knicks fans are not happy with what they saw this weekend and not happy with what they've seen recently. But we're going to talk all about it, and I thought one of the best people to talk about it is my guy from Knicks Fan TV, JD, who joins me now. JD, what's going on, my friend?
Not fun times to be around with this weekend, the debacle that was the New York Knicks versus the elite teams. But hey, we're here and let's break it down.
We are here, and I got to let the people know, I've been watching you. You've been very vocal, critical of certain things with this team that you've seen lately. I said I thought this weekend was a lost weekend for the Knicks, because I talked about this in our live show on Friday for New York Got Game, that, look, this was a big opportunity for the Knicks to show themselves, see how they measure up against the top two teams in the East, and it didn't look good at all. Do you look at this weekend as a lost weekend for the New York Knicks as well, JD?
Yes, I think this weekend was a huge opportunity for this franchise to create confidence within themselves as an organization, as a staff, as a team, and the fan base. If you look at the way the season has gone to date, when even some big national TV games like the Lakers, NBA Cup with the Atlanta Hawks, in addition to the elite teams already, the Knicks have not met the moment. They've beaten some good teams as well. They've gotten on some runs. They have a good record, third best record in the Eastern Conference, but there's been that last ingredient missing, which is competing and beating the top level teams that you're going to see later in the playoffs. And they had that great opportunity after All-Star break, and it was an absolute debacle. It was embarrassing. It was pathetic. You were on national TV back to back, and you did not even give yourself a chance to be in the game and let alone win these basketball games.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing, right? I think that's the thing that really frustrates some of the Knicks fan base, is that they weren't in these games. I want to take this game by game, because when we look on Friday night, so much hope. I understand Josh Hart was out. OG Anunoby was playing in his first game back after sitting out for 6 games. No Mitchell Robinson still. We understand all that. But then they get whooped by the Cavs by 37 points. What went wrong in that game against Cleveland? And I'll get to which loss you think was more disappointing, but what went wrong in that game against the Cavaliers?
Flat out from the beginning, they weren't ready to play. I don't think they, it's very disappointing too, because they were on a second on a back-to-back, but you're coming off a full week of a All-Star break. The Cavaliers were also in New York. They were just in Brooklyn the night before, so travels and all that stuff. Both teams had the same, same circumstances, and you had a national TV game, had a 7 o'clock start, and you give up 41 points in the first quarter. And so, when I look at that game where the Knicks gave up 51% shooting from three, the Knicks are last in the NBA in 3-point defense in terms of efficiency. And you gave, you allow 61% from the Cavaliers shooting overall. The Knicks were just not ready. And there is a toughness factor that seems to be missing from this team when we're talking about,
Mm-hmm.
playing physical, when we're talking about just having attitude, having grit, having moxie. A lot of the things that was the identity of last year's team. I think that's the issue that you're starting to see versus the elite teams is this team seems to still be developing what their ultimate identity is. They're hoping that Mitchell Robinson is going to have a say in that. And therefore, here we are with the 20-something games left, still trying to figure out what is the true ceiling of this basketball team for this season.
Yeah. So I love that you use that word, a couple words you used there, right? Like the grit, that's been a factor. And there's been a lot of comparisons between last year's team and this year's team. And I think you and I, we both understand this is not last year's team, right? We knew there was going to be some things that are different. But I think the word you used there that I find very interesting is identity. We still do not know the identity of this team. Like if somebody literally asked me, could you describe what this Knicks team is about? I couldn't really tell you. I could tell you they have a fearless leader in Jalen Brunson. That might be it. I'm really struggling here, right? Like I guess what I'll follow up before we get to Boston is, JD, do you think it's fair, or do you think the Knicks should have already established an identity by now? Or is this something that takes a lot more time, more continuity, more chemistry? Or should they have done this by now? I know it's tough questions, man. It's tough questions.
Because I think it all connects to some of the flaws of this team. So when we
Mm,
discuss all the questions about what the problem is, I think it's all going to connect to the fact that I think this front office looked at some of the potential moves that they made this all season, and I think they really understood, especially from a Karl Anthony Towns perspective, what was the weakness that could have now on the team by adding a Karl Anthony Towns and playing him at the five. But I also think they felt that with the ensuing moves that they made after the Karl Anthony Towns trade, I think they thought that with the duo of OG and Mikal, with Josh Hart, and then with Mitchell Robinson coming back, which him not being back yet, it's a little bit of a still TBD type of situation in terms of identity. But I think the front office felt that if we surround Jalen Brunson and Karl Anthony Towns with you know OG, Mikal, Josh Hart, Mitchell Robinson, like wings and defense, that can create that we can still continue to have the identity of last season, but it's just going to look different because now we're going to have more offensive talent while still maintaining some of that grit, some of that toughness. And I know for sure when they thought they were getting Mikal that this front office thought that their defense was actually going to take another step up.
mm.
Again, even as you have Karl Anthony Towns at the five, I think they were banking so much on some of these additions and all clicking together. And I think that's why they continue to put Mitchell Robinson into the spotlight as a kind of missing piece, which, in my opinion, you're putting a lot of pressure on Mitchell Robinson to come back with 20 games and kind of solve solve the defensive issue, solve the identity issue, solve the rim protection issue, solve everything. I think you're playing a dangerous game putting all this on the shoulders of Mitchell Robinson.
So I'm with you on that because I think that's a big ask, right? Like he's not going to be the savior here. He's not going to be the cure-all for the problems, and we'll get a little bit more into that. But where I do agree with you is that they don't have an identity right now, and they're trying to find it. I'm not saying that they should have an identity right now because I think I do understand things are a process and takes time. And I think you and I knew this, JD. I think we knew when they traded for Bridges, traded for Towns, that the Knicks were going to have a bit of an adjustment period. We knew the defense was not going to immediately click. We knew that doesn't. Now, I'm saying all this to say that doesn't mean I don't think the fans out there shouldn't be disappointed. They shouldn't want to see better effort. They shouldn't want to see some grit because I think that's been missing. I was sitting on Friday. We're talking about the Cavs game. I was sitting there. I was at the KFTV watch party, and I was with my boy Anthony, and he was like, "Man, this team just doesn't have an edge to them right now, right? And I think that's
Mm.
fair that you don't see the edge with the Knicks right now. So here's the thing: coming off Friday, they lose by 37, and here's what I'm thinking. All right, you lost by 37, you got your ass kicked. We get it. All right, Boston, they've put it on you twice this year. You're going to come out and show some fight. Again, another bad start on Sunday, JD. You don't see that against the Celtics. Uh, what was that bothersome to you that 2 games in a row you just didn't see that pride on defense in the beginning?
Yes, it did bother me. I will say though, I am not surprised. I am more upset of the Cavaliers' effort and results than I am
Hmm.
upset about the Celtics because I think this New York Knicks team has a serious matchup issues with an S, multiple against the Boston Celtics, where the Boston Celtics are a very, very well coached team. They're a very smart team, and they remind me of the championship LeBron teams, where um, LeBron would always search for the matchup advantage, and that's what the Celtics do. They're coached to look for every single advantage that they can get, and that's what they do possession to possession. They attack what they believe are your weaknesses, and they don't stop until you adjust. So they go into the games dictating terms. So when I look at the way we've played the Celtics so far, and the confidence that the Celtics, an already championship team, has a confidence about playing a big market team like the New York Knicks. You have the whole Boston, New York thing. I think there's also a psychological factor here that is weighing over the New York Knicks players going against the Celtics. So I look at that, and then I look at you're going to go against them on the road. You're going off a 37-point loss. The most you can do is give me effort, but is that effort going to even be enough to be down, double digits? And they were
Hmm.
down as much as 27 points um, versus the Celtics. And that was so I wasn't surprised by the outcome, but I was still definitely disappointed. Fight more. That there was no attitude out there. There was, as you mentioned, some of the stuff that we've been missing. It just seems like they came out there and they accepted the fact that, hey, we're not ready for you guys. And I think that's where everyone, especially the fans, are very upset with when we're talking about an identity in the New York Knicks.
Do you think, JD, because I'm hearing you say that and sort of the mindset for this team against the Celtics, do you feel like the Celtics are in the heads of the Knicks, like, or they're in their own heads about the Celtics right now, right? Where it's like you hit all the nails on the head there in terms of why the Celtics are so good and how they're able to hunt matchups, and then obviously how good they also are on the other side of the ball. But is that are the Knicks in their own heads about the Celtics right now?
I believe so. And and
Hmm.
and I and I also believe the Celtics have been motivated to play the Knicks this season. All you have to do sometimes people don't directly say something, although Jalen Brown did give you something
Hmm.
today. But sometimes people don't directly tell you something, but you can just tell by the way that they talk, their energy, their tone. When I look at Eddie House on the Boston Celtics, Brian Scalabrine, these are analysts, the way that they've been talking about the Knicks. Jalen Brown in the postgame today is asked, "Hey, have you guys been motivated a little bit more against the Knicks?" And he said, "Oh, definitely." And you know why he said definitely? Because a part of that question was also the fact that everyone knows the Knicks were quote unquote built from an OG and Mikal Bridges standpoint to defend him and Tatum. And Jalen Brown says, "Oh, definitely." And they asked him to elaborate on that. He didn't want to give you anything more. What does that tell you? That tells you that these Celtics players, they saw, oh, wait, you guys are adding Mikal and OG. Oh, so the talk is that you guys are going to try to match up with us, Porzingis, Towns, OG, Mikal, Tatum, Brown. Okay, so you guys think you could play with us. You guys think that you found the formula and the recipe to match up against us. Watch this. And that's the attitude and motivation that the Celtics have brought this season against the Knicks. You could tell. I mean, they've had their best shooting outputs against the New York Knicks.
Hmm.
And I think from on the Knicks side, mentally and psychologically, they also hear, oh, we got Mikal for Tatum. We have OG for Brown, vice versa, et cetera, et cetera. We got Towns to go up against Porzingis. The players hear this. And they know that the expectations were set out that, oh, everybody wanted to see last year's Knicks against the Celtics. That never happened because of what happens in the Pacers series. So now this season, everyone was excited to see it with this new roster. The players know that. And so when you go out there and you underperform and then you get slaughtered by the way that they have, you cannot tell me that this is now weighing in your mind and you're starting to doubt yourself of, can we beat this team? Can we even be on the same dinner table as them? And I think that's what's going on in their mind right now. And you see it in the record 0-7 versus Oklahoma City, Cleveland Cavaliers, and the Boston Celtics.
With that being said, and I think because of a lot of what you said there, JD, before the games this weekend, in my mind, the Celtic game was the more important game because they are the measuring stick, right? Like, you got just giving them their respect. They're the defending champions, all of that. They're the measuring stick. And I thought there was a world on a back-to-back the Knicks might not have had the best effort against the Cavs, but will come out a little bit better against the Celtics. That was not the case. But I do want to talk about one thing in that game. The Knicks get down by 27, as you mentioned. But they come back, they fight, and they cut it to 4. And I think it should be noted, and we're about to get into this a little bit, a lot of that happened without Mikal Bridges on the floor. And you saw Deuce McBride on the floor, and OG was on Tatum. And that's sort of where the game changed a lot there. Were you encouraged by anything in that stretch that you saw, if you want to say that was the fight from the Knicks in the game that made you say, okay, this team can compete with them if they want to? And maybe it was the personnel or trying something new. And I know now we're getting into coaching, and I'm not saying fire Tibbs. I know some of y'all might be saying that out there. I'm getting into that. But were you encouraged by what you saw with that lineup that sparked that comeback against the Celtics?
I was encouraged, but a lot of it also is because this is a lineup and this is a situation from a matchup standpoint that, content creators, analysts, Knicks fans, you name it, have been calling for when you talk about facing up against the Boston Celtics. And that is one above many is playing Deuce McBride more. We're going to have to start having some uncomfortable, we could say uncomfortable conversation, but listen, they're real conversations. At the end of the day, this is about the ultimate goal of, beating the Celtics, because who I think, even though they're the second best record, are the class of the East because of their experience and their championship pedigree, right? So Deuce McBride being able to give you more physicality and being able to fight over screens a little bit better than Mikal Bridges right there alone is giving you more fight. It's giving you more compete. And therefore, him playing there. And the funny thing is, you look at his numbers, he went 1 for 7 today, didn't hit a 3. Somehow, though, he was, a very, very big part of that comeback. And so McBride was a big factor. And then you talk about OG Anunoby, he stepped up his defense. Now, OG Anunoby did not play well for most of the game, but it's something about sometimes the contagious energy of when one player leads the way, everybody follows. And between him and OG Anunoby, Deuce McBride and OG, they were able to give the New York Knicks a chance. Then now Karl Anthony Towns in that stretch, now his offense starts to pick up, and you started to see the chemistry of that lineup give you a better chance because the players defensively were able to be more physical. And that all happened with Mikal Bridges, who was a minus 23 today. Nobody other than Josh Hart, who was a minus 12, was even close to that type of number. And I'm not a real plus minus type of guy all the time. It doesn't always tell you the true story, but it definitely told you the true story today with Mikal Bridges and his, awful game today.
Okay. Let's get into it, because this was going to be a big part of the topic and talking about it. And you said we have to have some uncomfortable conversations. I really feel like this is therapy here. I feel like this is therapy that we're trying to do. But I said this the other day watching the Cavs game. And it's, look, Mikal Bridges has to be better. And I'm not going to get into what the Knicks gave up to get him and all that stuff, because I understand there was a little bit of a Brooklyn tax there, and there was going to be. Did the Knicks pay a little bit more than they would have in a normal situation? Yeah, of course. But has Mikal Bridges been good thus far in the New York Knicks uniform? The answer is no. He's been absolutely inconsistent. And I don't get as much concerned about the shooting, and I never have with him. For me, JD, it's been about the defensive effort, right? We saw early in the season he was dying on screens. I'm not seeing that pride, that edge that my man Anthony was talking about, right? From him. Where JD, are you shocked at the lack of edge? I'm trying to have a better word, but edge just works perfectly. From him in these primetime matchups against these elite teams. And I guess what I'm asking here is, do the Knicks have a Mikal Bridges problem? Is there a problem right now with Mikal Bridges on the roster and how they fix that? Because you just talked about how when one player comes in, that energy could be infectious and contagious. And also, maybe when one player is not there, that also shifts the energy. You understand what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So is there a problem? Is there a Mikal Bridges problem for the Knicks right now?
And this is where we're gonna have some uncomfortable
Here we go. Let's do it.
You know, I'm gonna do this as just dialogue, barbershop talk. Let's just talk about it, and go back and forth and see what conclusion we can come up with. So, the interesting thing with Mikal is, I don't think he's a problem for 95% of the league, 90% of the league. But the problem is, he's a problem in terms of who you have to face, who you have to beat to get to the ultimate goal, which is a championship. Because Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, I don't even think are even 28 years old, which means they're not going anywhere. And that core is going to stay in Boston. And when I say that is, just like the rest of the team, Mikal, although he's been inconsistent, he plays well enough versus everyone else to be able to give you hope that he'll turn it around. But when it comes to the Boston Celtics, the Cavaliers, and OKC, who I'm not even going to count OKC, I'm really focused on the Celtics even above the Cavaliers. But in 7 games against those three teams, he shot one free throw attempt. He's shooting 44% overall. He's shooting 27% from 3. He's averaging only 14 points. And it's even deeper than those numbers because that's just more offensive. There's an issue here, Dexter, where against the Celtics, there's a personnel problem versus the elite teams. And when it comes to the personnel, Mikal, I think that when you're going up against Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, you need one of your perimeter players, in addition to Jalen Brunson, to be able to put pressure on the defense. And right now, those areas get exposed when we play the Celtics because Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum are outstanding defenders on top of Eric White and already Drew Holiday. But today, where you have these people know where to go because they have Drew Holiday on Jalen Brunson, and now you're looking around and saying, wait, who else is going to create a shot for us? OG Anunoby doesn't have elite ball handling skills to do that. He takes 2 dribbles, he stops. Mikal Bridges, when Mikal Bridges goes to the basket, what does he do? As soon as he feels pressure near the rim, he stops his dribble. He either pulls his dribble back and resets the offense, or he doesn't do anything else because he doesn't get all the way to the rim. He doesn't create contact at the rim. He shies away from the rim. So now you're looking at it and you're like, wait, how can we create offense versus the Celtics? The Celtics have elite wing defenders, but our wings don't create offense. They don't have shot creation ability. So then we go back to the captain has to save the day. And I think that's a big problem moving forward against the Celtics, is that Mikal is not an elite shot creator. He can get by everyone else. You set him a screen, he'll get to the mid-range shot, he'll get to the paint, shoot a mid-range shot. He'll create his offense against those teams. But when you're going up against the Celtics, that ability, that inability gets exposed. So to me, that is a problem. And then now defensively,
the defense.
And this is why this answer is is a long answer
No, it's fine.
because
We
he's
we
the
we
main
here. We
problem.
got we got time, bro. We're good. Yeah.
I think defensively, one of the main problems also is Dexter that I really believe when the New York Knicks made the Karl Anthony Towns trade, I think they knew. Of course, they knew. Tom Thibodeau coached them. They knew the Karl Anthony Towns issue at the 5, which I don't know if it's a solvable issue. But I think they felt that the way that we can counter that, we're not going to solve it because even in Minnesota, him at the 4, they were able to hide it enough, but it doesn't mean that they necessarily solved Karl Anthony Towns' defensive deficiencies. They created an environment and a personnel around them that were able to hide it enough. I think they felt that if we get the OG, remember, OG was like all defensive player of the year caliber last season. And I think Leon Rose felt if we're gonna get that OG and we could bring Mikal Bridges now, Phoenix Suns Mikal Bridges, that could be enough with Josh Hart and Mitchell Robinson. That nucleus they believed could be enough to offset some of the deficiencies of Karl Anthony Towns' issue as a defensive 5. And I think what they're seeing now is not only is the Karl Anthony Towns issue at the 5 defensively a big issue, but it's even more glaring because Mikal Bridges at the wing position, who was brought here to at least help contain, to fight, to be physical against a Tatum and Brown, he's not even giving you a chance against some of these top guys. And now you've made a move to kind of help another weakness, and you've actually
Another
developed
weakness.
more
Right.
than one weakness. And this is where now we have a huge issue in terms of evaluating the true ceiling of this
No,
team.
I think everything that you just described there and you laid out is rational. I think it's more than fair. I think it's also what I've been seeing. So I don't because as you were going through that, I was going to stop you. And I'm glad I didn't because it was just like, yeah, but this is what you brought Bridges here for. You brought him to be part of the solution to solve a problem. And now it appears, and granted, I get it. Maybe something changes. Maybe there's a light switch. Something happens. Bridges gets it. He's more physical. He's not dying on screens. He's making life harder for these elite players. And I also want to be very clear about what you said. We understand as people who watch basketball very closely. Mikal Bridges is not going to stop Jason Tatum. Nobody's going to stop Jason Tatum. Nobody's going to stop Jaylen Brown. They are elite offensive players. But you're asking to give yourself a chance by slowing them down, making life difficult, not have it too easy that they're getting wide open threes or they're walking into threes. That's what we've been seeing with Mikal Bridges. I think today in OG Anunoby, today is Sunday when we're recording this, on Sunday, OG Anunoby, you saw his defensive impact when Bridges was out the game. And I still personally feel watching this team, OG Anunoby still being asked to do way too much because Mikal Bridges isn't living up to the part of what the Knicks expected to get from him. And I'm with you, JD. It's created another problem. That's why I asked the question, do the Knicks have a Mikal Bridges problem? And it sounds like both of us are saying yes. There's a problem here. Now, the second part of this question, talk about it, is can this problem be remedied, right? And you've brought up, I'm going to say, because you've also said it's a personnel and a coaching problem, okay? You know what? Let's rip the Band-Aid off. Let's get into this too with the Mikal Bridges. What can Tom Thibodeau do to help Mikal Bridges be the Mikal Bridges that we've seen before? A lot of people saying, hey, I want to see Phoenix Mikal Bridges. All right. We understand that he's not Brooklyn Mikal Bridges, and he's not the Brooklyn Mikal Bridges that we saw in the first 20 to 25 games of his career with the Nets when he was a 25 game. We understand he's not that guy, right? Like, we get that. But can he be Phoenix Bridges? I think Knicks fans would gladly sign for that right now. Is there something Tom Thibodeau can do to get him back to that? Is it on him himself? Is it other guys in the locker room? Because I'm getting a sense that, there's some frustration, not with him, but just with the way they've been losing to the Celtics and Cavs. But how is this Mikal Bridges problem solved? That's my question.
It's I think the coach is going to, again, and this is where the dangerous game is going to be played, is I think because of the personnel and the rotations and the alignments of these lineups, it's part of it is going to have to be in tandem with Mitchell Robinson, where they're going to hope that, because the fact of the matter is Karl Anthony Towns at the 5 defensively is giving his perimeter players, there is more pressure on everyone else, because there's a pressure to keep guys in front of you and to stay and to fight over the screens on the picks, because a lot of teams are attacking Karl Anthony Towns on the pick and roll. So there is a connection there. However, even when Mitch is back, Mitch is not going to help Bridges in isolation. Mitch is not going to help Bridges fighting over screen. Like, Mitch being there is not going to automatically make Bridges say, you know what? Oh, I'm going to fight over the screen now. Oh, I'm going to play better defense. So I think the coach is going to have to switch up some of the schemes. I don't think he's going to do that right away. I think they're going to continue to stay with the scheme, because listen, a coach is going to do what he believes in, especially when he believes that his quarterback of the defense, which is at this point Mitchell Robinson as a center, when he's not there. So I think when Mitchell Robinson gets back, they're going to continue to stay with that until it shows with him that it's still not working. But if it doesn't, you're going to have to do some more switching and see how that goes. But here's
Mm-hmm.
the main thing. Even with we can talk all the schemes
Right,
we
right.
want, Dexter. You cannot teach this.
I agree.
You can't. How do you teach that? How do you tell a player to be something else that they may not have it in them, or that they're not comfortable, or that didn't get them to this point, right? Because Mikal Bridges did not get to this point being a rah-rah guy, being a physical guy, right? I mean, listen, it's not like he was in Phoenix fighting over every screen, but he was definitely a better point of attack defender. The issue here is he's just getting beat off the dribble way too easily. And he's getting caught in no man's land where he's not physical enough. But then when he drops back, he gives his
Yep.
guy too much space. So now his contest has no problem. It doesn't do anything. So he he's not confident in which way to play. In my opinion, I've always said, forget everything. Play the guy tight, play the guy physical. If
You
you
get
get beat
beat.
off the dribble, fine. When Mitchell Robinson's back, you hope that he helps with that. But the way that he's playing now is just not sustainable, in my opinion, especially when the playoffs come and everything goes up another notch, where now we're really talking about your opponent trying to expose your weaknesses. If you can't even do that in the regular season, I don't know how you do that in the playoffs. And a lot of fans are banking on the fact that it's a switch. Everybody's going to
Nah.
turn into a switch. And I just don't know where's the track record for us to believe that this Knicks team is just going to turn a switch when the playoffs come, and then everything is going to
Yeah,
be resolved.
yeah,
It's a big
I've
issue
watched
there.
way too much basketball and covered way too much basketball to know switches like that generally don't work without seeing some sample size of it. I've mentioned this on this show, and I think it's fair because this could happen for this Knicks team. What I'm putting out there, we have seen teams. We saw this very recently with the Denver Nuggets that did not start off a season very good defensively and then trended the right way before the playoffs, right, JD? But that's the key. You saw a small sample size, or I wouldn't even say small, like a pretty good over a month period before the playoffs of them trending the right way and becoming a top 12 defense. And then they were able to put it together in the playoffs. It wasn't like they just flipped the switch and that was it. And I want to let people know, because there might be some people
Right.
listening to this on audio, not video. What JD was saying about this inside of you, he was pointing to his heart. And he's talking about the heart of Mikal Bridges and the grit for him to fight through. And a player has to have heart. Now, I asked you the question, can anything be done with the coaching staff? But inside, I believe it does come down to the player. Like, your teammates can tell
Yeah.
you everything. Jalen Brunson can get in his face. Josh Hart get in his face. I'm not reporting that or saying that that's happening. I'm sure they're talking to him. But at the end of the day, just like anything else in life, he has to make the conscious decision to say, okay, I want to do this. I've looked at the tape. I don't look good out there. If I go down, like to your point, JD, if I'm going to play aggressive and tight and I get beat, I get beat. But at least you're going to see that effort. I don't think that we watching this team have seen the requisite effort from Mikal Bridges. And I think the only way he can get better is if it comes inside. It's on him. It's on him.
Yeah. And listen, another adjustment you can make, which this is the problem. I'm going to tell you another adjustment you can make, but again, it creates
Hmm.
another issue. The other adjustment you can make is same thing defensive coordinators do in the NFL when defenses are struggling and the defensive coordinator has what people think is a complex scheme. They simplify it, right? They simplify the play calls, simplify the coverage schemes, and they just tell their man, just cover the guy in front of you and let's simplify everything so that we can all have communication and everything can be executed accordingly. With Mikal, you can do that and say, you know what? Instead of you guarding the toughest assignment every week, every day, every game, we're going to give OG that responsibility. Let's give you a little bit of an easier assignment. Let's pair you with another guard or another small forward. Cool. But guess what? Now you're giving OG that responsibility when, in fact, in Tom Thibodeau's scheme, Tom Thibodeau prefers that Mikal takes that perimeter player so that OG could be in the passing lanes, so that OG can kind of, get into the creases of players going to the basket. And that's where OG gets a lot
Okay.
of his steals. That's where OG is allowed to be physical as a help defender, as an aggressive defender, sort of like a free safety. But if you now ask OG to cover Tyrese Maxey, which we saw he struggled a little bit in the playoffs, if you ask OG now to cover some of these guards and perimeter players, you're now kind of helping Mikal Bridges because he doesn't have that responsibility, but you're not maximizing that personnel. Where are you creating now the steals that OG's giving you? Because now OG has to fight over these screens and trail guards and chase guards. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah,
So
I see it.
yes, we can find a way to help him, but is making those adjustments actually helping the other four guys on the floor? And that is why, again, in my opinion, there is a Mikal Bridges problem because, as you mentioned, above heart, it's like it has to be in you. You have to want to take it personal. And right now, it doesn't look like he's taking it personal. Right now, it looks like his confidence defensively is shot. And again, he'll find it against the other teams. And like I said, when you look at his numbers, it's not like he has terrible numbers. He's shooting high percentage. When you look at a lot of third options, it's not like he's, 10, 12 points per game. He's giving you in terms of numbers, what other third options give you. It's just when you watch the actual games versus the Celtics, you see now where the true flaws are for this team.
Yeah. No, you've seen it, and you've absolutely seen it with him. All right, let me ask you this: a couple more things before we go. And this has been a good discussion, and I hope it's helping the people out there a little bit. Mitchell Robinson, Shams Charania reported expected to make his return within the next week. Could be this week. Are you? I know you and I are on the same page with this. We don't think that Mitchell Robinson's return is going to cure the issues that we've seen with the Knicks, but are you excited to see him return? And when he returns, how much on the floor do you want to see him with Karl Anthony Towns, with him playing the 5 and Cat at the 4?
I'm extremely excited because it's been a long time coming for Mitchell Robinson, man. He's had such an interesting Knicks career, and the funny thing is, Dexter, you see it in his Instagram posts. You
Yeah.
see it in like his personality. He's a very interesting individual. But guess what, Dexter? That might be what this team needs right now,
Mm,
right? Like it's not making an impact yet because he's not on the floor.
mm.
We're seeing the impact in his IG posts and his Twitter posts. But guess what? Once he starts playing, and if he starts making an impact, all that goofiness and that personality and Mitchell Robinson is actually like he gets criticized a lot in the Knicks fan base, but guess what? He doesn't back down from anyone.
Nah, he doesn't.
Like he does it in a different way. He doesn't swing on players, but he's competitive. He's a competitor. You saw it against Joel Embiid, not only last season, previous seasons. You've seen it against, Evan Mobley, Jared Allen. We actually have a player coming back that has played well against some of these individual players. And at least from that standpoint, Dexter, again, as you mentioned, I don't think it's going to solve everything. Mitchell Robinson is not a 30 points, gap. He's going to close the gap of 30 points that we've been getting smoked by for this team. He's not going to close that type of gap. But guess what? He's going to give your front office the information you need now because when he gets back and he gets in game shape, you're going to see everything you need as a front office right before the offseason in terms of how he clicks with OG and Mikal and Karl Anthony Towns. And do I want him see him at the 5? Yes, because you saw where the Minnesota Timberwolves almost went last season with that type of environment with Gobert and Karl Anthony Towns. And I think even you've seen a little bit recently with Tom Thibodeau's alignments that he may be prepping the team for Mitchell Robinson's return, playing him with Precious, playing him with Huck Porty in some minutes. And so we want to see what that looks like, because guess what, Dexter? They don't have any choice. Like, nothing's worked against the Celtics.
That is a good point.
You don't have a choice.
That's a good point.
You don't have a choice. This is not even about, imagine, like, using your imagination. This coaching staff has to look at lineup decisions. They have to look at Josh Hart coming off the bench. They have to look at Deuce McBride potentially being a starter. And Deuce McBride doesn't have to start against the other teams. But you know what? You might have to do something. And I always said this about Tom Thibodeau. Tom Thibodeau is going to have to do something wacky versus the Boston Celtics. Just like teams do, use a wing or small guard against Karl Anthony Towns to throw us off. In order to beat this team, because there's no trade deadline, we can't add players. So we understand their weakness. That's for the off season. What can we do to maximize this roster? And if we don't have the chips here, then we have to do something, outside of the box. And guess what? That might be Deuce McBride starting. That might be Mitchell Robinson starting. That might be Josh Hart coming off the bench. That might be Mikal Bridges coming off the bench. Everything is on everything has to be on the table if you're truly serious about beating the Boston Celtics, which, again, you're going to play them in the second round the way things are going. So we can forget about the Cavaliers. We may not get there to have that conversation. If you're truly serious about beating the Boston Celtics, everything is on the table. Nothing should not be considered in terms of lineups, rotations, and defensive.
I agree with you. I really don't have much to add other than saying that, yes, everything should be on the table. The goal is to win. I'm not saying the Knicks were going to win a championship this year. But I think the term you just used, maximize the roster, right? That's what you want to try to do. And another thing that you've been saying throughout this conversation, JD, which I think you're spot on about, is that the front office is always looking. I think fans sometimes forget this, is that the front office is looking to gather information constantly to see what works. And just because something worked or didn't work this year doesn't mean it's a complete mistake. Maybe this is a bad season for Mikal Bridges, but there is an information now out there, which JD has alluded to in his play against the Cavs and the Thunder and the Celtics, right? There is information, and you take that information and you make adjustments. And we'll see what adjustments the front office can make. Now, they can't make that many adjustments this year. There is the buyout market, which is going to lead me to what I want to talk to you about next. Do you want the Knicks to do anything on the buyout market? I'm somebody who's like, if you're banking on the buyout market, you got some problems, right? You can't be banking on the buyout market to save your team. There's been some rumors of Victor Oladipo. I've seen that floating around. This week, somebody asked me about that on a show I went on. I'm not sure he solves the issues for the Knicks. In fact, actually, you could say he does not solve the issues that for the Knicks. I see you shaking your head, JD. Any interest in Victor Oladipo? Is there a player out there you'd like to see the Knicks get on the buyout market that can, I'm going to say this to be clear, not solve issues, but maybe help them a little bit down the stretch over the last 25 games? Is there any player out there?
Listen, Victor Oladipo is interesting because, again, you're at a point with this Knicks roster that you have a head coach, and listen, you just got to be transparent, right? You have a head coach that is not at this point confident that he is going to play some of your young guys, right? You have a head coach that, and this is how you got to game plan it. Like, if the head coach is not going to play a young guy in the playoff rotation, then what's the point? Right? Like, what's the point anyways? So the front office is going to probably look at veteran players, veteran options. That's why you've heard the name TJ Warren. You're hearing now rumors of Victor Oladipo. These are guys that have been in playoff games before, that have been in those environments. And with Victor Oladipo, you get potential shot creation ability. If he is, anywhere near the player he was before, you get at least some of that. Does he have any athleticism left? I don't know. We haven't seen him in a while. So we don't know what he has left in the tank. And that's kind of the questions that even TJ Warren faces in the NBA floor. No, he's doing very well in the G League, but it's like you start to see, Dexter, what some of your options are. You're talking about guys of do they have
Right.
anything left? And
Right.
that's the problem. That's the problem with banking in the buyout market. And it's also a different era of basketball. I remember when the buyout market used to actually be good for those championship caliber teams where they're just finding their last rotation piece, and the buyout market was helpful. But this era with the CBA, the Knicks can't get no one that made over 12 million or whatever it is. Ben Simmons was, might be the most notable buyout market name, and you saw him going to the Clippers. He's actually been playing well with the Clippers. But this era is a new era in professional sports where a lot of teams are just going for young guys. They rather develop through the draft. And when you look at the buyout market, you're not really seeing, the options that you did in the past, where you have a lot of like playoff veteran performers. You're not seeing that right now. You're just seeing a bunch of what? There's not no real good options that in a Tom Thibodeau team is actually going to crack the rotation. So they can add someone. They can add TJ Warren. You're going to tell me that TJ Warren is going to be part of the 8-9 man rotation in playoffs?
Yeah.
No, he's not. So it's just looking at another body to potentially save minutes. And Mitchell Robinson's
Right.
on the mend. So where are the
Right.
minutes going to come?
Right. That's I agree. I think to talk about, maybe Javonte Green, who ended up going to the Cavs, could have been a nice pickup. I'm not sure how much he would have solved. He would have given you some size, some length, on the wing. It still doesn't solve a lot.
Torrey Craig was the guy. Torrey Craig was the guy I wanted, but he went to the Celtics.
Right. That Torrey Craig.
That's the
Torrey Craig
CBA.
was a guy I liked. I remember when CP came on with me for the deadline show. We both talked about him. He went there. Look, the buyout market is what it is. And you're right. It's because of this new era of basketball. It's because of the new CBA with the aprons. A lot of teams are not going to be aggressive because you saw this at the trade deadline. A lot of teams trying to stay below the luxury tax line, stay below that second apron, which the Knicks are trying to do. The Knicks' best moves, and again, I've been saying this all season long, the Knicks' best moves to upgrade this roster likely are going to come this offseason. It is not this season. I know that disappoints so many people, but it is what it is. All right, JD, before we put a bow on this, I got to ask you this. All right, we got 25 more games to go after recording this in this season. And you and I were talking about this a little bit before we started recording. And you know this because you're as plugged in as anybody I know. And you've been very vocal and critical about things with the team. Look, where the Knicks are and where the Knicks record is at 37-20, they are a very good team. Are they championship contenders? No, because we've seen how they've looked against the elite of the elite. But they've beaten some good teams this year. They've had wins against Memphis, Denver, Houston. We can talk about some good teams they've beaten this year, right? But the rest of this regular season, what are you going to be watching over these last 25 games? What's going to excite you over these last 25 games? Because it feels like we've gotten to a point now where it's like, well, we got to see how the Knicks are against the Cavs or Celtics. Otherwise, nothing else matters. Are you there? Like, where are you in terms of watching this Knicks team over the final 25 games of the season?
Honestly, I think the Mitch is one of the ones that our fans are just now going to be excited about. Other than that, like the Mitch Robinson dynamic is going to be very, very interesting because you want to see how he comes back to the team. You want to see how that affects. It's funny. Mitch Robinson could actually change the outlook or the morale, the confidence of the fan base, because you know how we are. This is New York City. If we beat a team, we always think we can go all the way, and when we lose, we think everything is going, is the end of the world. And Mitch Robinson has actually an opportunity as they play, these second tier teams now to give the fan base some confidence that, okay, now let's see how they do now when they play the Celtics. Let's see how they do now when they play the Cavaliers, if the Knicks kind of take a step up defensively with his return. Other than that, we talked about it backstage. It's an unfortunate situation where, as you mentioned, they have the third best record in the East. They're one of the top teams in the NBA altogether. And yet, not only because they're 0-7 against it's also the point differential. It's how they're losing that's created this environment now where if it ain't against those teams, nothing matters. I mean, I'm looking at the schedule. Those fans are probably going to be excited to play the Lakers at the Crypto Arena because those are big market NBA teams. You like that matchup. Maybe Golden State at the Garden, Curry coming to the Garden once a year with Jimmy Butler and Draymond Green. That could be exciting games. But other than that, you're looking at, again, does it matter if we can't beat the Celtics, if we can't beat the Cavaliers? And that is an environment that's very unfortunate because these players have worked hard. They do have a very good record. But again, they haven't shown they haven't given us talk, to my friends. We're not even on the same floor. It's crazy. So it's one of those weird dynamics. If they would have won just two of those, if they would have been 2-5, you still have hope. You still have anticipation. You still have excitement. You're looking at these next games and you're still evaluating and getting excited and counting them as good wins. But because that has not happened, it's like, they play the Sixers on Wednesday and then they're at Memphis. Let's say they win those two. What does that really do?
See, that's the thing, right? We're talking at the time of recording. The Knicks have won 10 out of their last 14 games, and it sounds like they just went 5-9 in the last 14 games. That's what it sounds like right now with the Knicks family.
And mind you,
yeah.
if it was the other way around, but those wins would have been against those elite teams,
people would have felt
saying,
better.
"Oh, they're just playing down to their competition." Yep. You would have felt better.
Yeah. But see, JD, you know this, being a New York sports fan for a long time, and you brought it up so well. This is what happens when the expectations get raised. Because look, sometimes, and I don't know, and I think you make a good point. I don't think it's necessarily, fair is not the right word I want to use. Fair is not the right word. I should think about this. Because look, fans have the expectations, media's expectations. My colleague Stephen Bondi said, look, this is the Eastern Conference Finals or bust season. He has come out and said that. I think there's more context to it, and I said this on the last episode of the show, but I understand why fans have the expectations raised. I respect that, and the money fans pay to go support this team, see this team. And I think the one thing I'll add as we wrap is that, look, the front office, as JD has brought up, has had a lot of thoughts in mind about this team. I don't think the move from Mikal Bridges was not thought about. I see the thought process. I see the logic. And sometimes it happens and sometimes things don't work out. I'm not saying it's over. It didn't work out. I still think we're at a point where we have enough of a sample size, but we still need to see more. We need to give this team with 3 new starters this year some more time to grow. But I can't blame the Knicks fan for being disappointed, because where the Knicks are, they got themselves to the point where fans wanted to believe, JD, that they were knocking on the door, right? And now it seems like you knocked on the door of the Celtics, the Cavs, and the Thunder, and nobody answered. Nobody came to the door. They shut the door in your face, right? Like you feel like somebody removed you from the doorstep. Like you don't belong. You got to go sit at the little kids' table right now because you're good, but you're not quite good enough. And that's just how it feels around the Knicks, which is crazy. We're talking about this. They've won 10 out of their last 14 games. Teams will kill for that stretch. That's all I'm saying.
Right. But when you talk about expectations, they, because obviously the front office doesn't communicate. They don't talk to the media, but their actions, it's their communication. And I know Josh Hart hates talking about the picks, but it wasn't only the Karl Anthony Towns move. Put it into perspective as a full off season. They made seismic changes to this roster all in one off season. So it's not like they got Karl Anthony Towns one off season, Mikal Bridges the next, and you're slowly building the roster. They gave the impression when you gave up 5 picks for Mikal, and I got that notification, Dexter. Let's go back. I was at a restaurant and I was going crazy. I called CP. When I looked at not only who we got, but when I looked at what we gave up, that right there was the front office communicating to everyone, saying we believe he could be the final piece, because you took away literally like 80% of what you have left in the closet to improve this roster in terms of assets. And that is the communication. It's the fact that you gave up so many unprotected picks along with the other protected picks all together for this one player after you got the number 2 option. So usually when you have the first and second option, you build around them. We acquired a second option. Then we acquired a third, and we said we're giving 5 picks for this third guy. Usually, when you look at around professional sports and that specific move is made, that front office is telling everyone, we think this piece,
It's over the top.
this transaction is going to push us over the top or get us at that level. And I think that is why you're seeing this whirlwind of emotions with the fan base. That is why I'm not mad at those fans that have these expectations, because the front office told you with that move, this is what we believe. And there you have it.
I completely understand it. You're right. Actions over words, right? Sometimes we understand that we don't hear from Leon Rose in the media, but actions over words. And they made the action to say, hey, this is where we think. And I agree, maybe over the top might be strong, but at least put us into that championship contention. And sadly, right now, despite the Knicks winning 10 out of the last 14 games, despite having the third best record in the East, I think, fifth or sixth best record in basketball, it feels
they're about to go on another run too. Watch.
Oh yeah, the Knicks,
despite them about to go on another run. So I was just adding.
It's gonna be funny when you're watching you guys do your thing on KFTV, and then when I have you guys on with me or I'm doing this show, it's gonna be really interesting to talk about the rest of the season, JD, because of the expectations, and everybody's gonna be like, "Yo, when's the next 2 Cleveland games? When's the next Boston game? Let's see what happens in the playoffs." I do agree with you, and I loved how you answered the question. I do think if you see an impact with Mitch coming back and the defense is trending up, because that's the thing I'm watching the rest of the season, is the defense trending in the right direction? If the defense is trending in the right direction and they start to look competitive in those games the next time they play the Cavs and the Celtics, then I think you'll start seeing some people saying, oh, okay. Also, the other thing we have to know, obviously, that we've been talking about this whole show, Mikal Bridges has to play better. That's the other thing you got to be watching the rest of the season. Mikal Bridges has to play better. And if I'll say this, and you know this as a longtime New York sports fan, if he shows heart and he shows up and he has big moments, not against Nikola Vucevic and the Bulls, he does it against one of these teams, all will be forgiven and forgotten, people. All of you guys will be back on the Bridges bandwagon like nothing ever happened. You won't hear about the picks, all that stuff. But it's interesting times for the New York Knicks. JD, I'm glad you are well. We'll see if the Knicks can get better. Hopefully, everybody check JD out on Knicks Fan TV. He does a great job there. Yeah, JD, I agree with you. I think the Knicks might go on another streak and people will still be disappointed. Like, it's still going to be disappointed until they see some changes. But we'll see, my friend. I'll have you back on New York Got Game. I appreciate you joining me and giving some time to hopefully get the Knicks fans just a little bit of therapy, my friend. Appreciate you, bro.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Dexter. It's always an honor. It's always fun talking Knicks and professional sports with you. And let's get on to the second half and see how the Knicks finish this season.
See how they do. Thank you. This week on New York Got Game, as we honor Black History Month, we're going to take some time to celebrate another true New York basketball trailblazer, and his name is Nat Sweetwater Clifton, a man who was not just dominant on the basketball court. He should be mentioned among the greats because he also was a true pioneer when it came to breaking barriers. In 1950, Clifton made history as the first Black player to sign an NBA contract when he joined the New York Knicks, a skilled forward with a smooth game honed on the playgrounds of Chicago and the Harlem Globetrotters. Clifton, he brought toughness, versatility, and leadership to the Knickerbockers. Standing at 6'7", he had the strength to battle in the paint, the agility to run the floor, and the passing ability that made him a key playmaker in an era when big men weren't expected to handle the ball. And his impact, it was immediate. In his rookie season with the Knicks, Clifton played a crucial role, leading the team to its first ever NBA Finals appearance in 1951. And in that season, he averaged 8.6 points and 7.7 rebounds per game, helping the Knicks become one of the top teams in the league. He was a vital piece of a squad that also featured Carl Braun and Harry Gallatin. His contributions on both ends of the floor were instrumental in their postseason run. Over the course of his career with the Knicks, Clifton was known for his physical play, strong rebounding, and unselfish style. He became one of the league's first true enforcers, using his strength to protect teammates and dominate in the paint. In 1957, he was named an NBA All-Star, making him one of the earliest Black players to receive that honor. Clifton played 7 seasons in the league, finishing his NBA career with averages of 10 points and 8 rebounds per game. But his journey, it was far from easy. Like so many black athletes of his time, Clifton faced racism on and off the court, and segregation was still a harsh reality in many parts of the country. Black players often had to deal with discrimination in hotels, restaurants, and even from some fans. His impact is still felt today. The Knicks, they honor his legacy with the Nat Clifton Award, given to individuals who exemplify teamwork, leadership, and community service, qualities that Clifton himself embodied throughout his life. And in 2014, he was posthumously inducted into the Naismith Memorial Basketball Hall of Fame, ensuring that his contributions to the game will never be forgotten. Nat Clifton didn't just change basketball, he changed the culture of the game. He is a huge part of American history and also black history. And his contributions, being the first black player in the NBA, will never be forgotten. It is for his contributions to our society why he is our Black History Month trailblazer this week on New York Got Game. Well, Knicks fans, if you're looking at this week, at least you know on the schedule, there's no Cleveland, there's no Boston. Now, I understand that might not make the rest of what we have to see for the regular season that interesting, but there are still a couple of more matchups against those teams, so we'll see. But this week, the Knicks will host Philadelphia on Wednesday, and they're at Memphis on Friday before going to Miami on Sunday to battle the Heat. So still have some teams that, well, not the Sixers, I was going to say they're in playoff contention. They were expected to be in playoff contention, but you have the Grizzlies, one of the best teams in the West, who the Knicks already beat at home, and then you play the Heat, a rival, which always is a heated game down there at MSG South. So we will see how the Knicks fare and how they bounce back. But a lot of the talk around this team, as I talked about with JD, isn't really going to change until people see them competitive against the best teams in the NBA and the best teams in the East. That does it for this episode of New York Got Game. Got to thank my editor, Antonio Oliveras Nicole, production assistant, Jeff Stansberry. Also, big thanks to my guest, JD from Knicks Fan TV. We appreciate him checking in, all his insight and passion about the Knicks and what the Knicks fan base is going through right now. Should be an interesting week, as I said, of Knicks basketball. A lot to watch, along with St. John's, as they make their push for the Big East title. Big East tournament, that's coming up in a couple of weeks. This is the last episode for the month of February. It'll be March, unbelievably, already next week. So March Madness is right around the corner. For all the good people who work on the show here at New York Got Game, I'm Dexter Henry. We'll catch you next time on New York Got Game.
And thanks for watching New York Got Game. Boom shakalaka.